the ecological site is a framework to support the capture of ecological concepts that are based on observations and professional understanding of the dynamics between the ecosystem and its soil-landscape interactions. The drafting of provisional ESDs is akin to naming and placement of an ES into a taxonomic hierarchy system. The ESD and its STM framework provides a platform to record and communicate knowledge of a site's ecological function. ESDs provide potential novel research opportunities to academic, government, and other institutional experts. In order to develop a useful ES concept, strong collaboration between government, academic, and NGO communities is critical. It requires input from scientific approaches as well as empirically derived tacit knowledge of the landscape management. More simply, development of an ES requires understanding the ecosystem dynamics as well as capturing the art of land management. This collaboration can be viewed as an iterative cycle such that development of the ES concept is not necessarily a fixed process based on a prescribed data set gathered in one study. Its cycle of evolution is loosely borrowed from the 9 steps of conservation planning and shows how the development of the science requires regular feedback regarding the success of management practices applied to a site. Currently, NESH has developed parts 630 and 631 to provide guidance on the policy, procedures, and most importantly, practical guidance to develop the ESD in a consistent and comprehensive manner. Why should land uses other than those of the natural or reference states be considered in the state and transition models of an ecological site concept? An ecological site is not just a forest or range site, but includes all possible land use conditions. It gives us the capability to document the changes in the soil ecosystem landscape as a function of management and allows us to predict similar changes to other land of the same types. History of management success can be retained in the ESD alongside the knowledge of ecosystem dynamics such that future management strategies will have these records at their disposal for use in their planning objectives. The tricky part of 632 language, its strong guidance permits us to communicate concepts across distance and time barriers such that the work of any generation stays relevant. However, we don't want to overprescribe such that it becomes cumbersome, nor proscribe such that it interferes with our ability to innovate. Subparts will be drafted for a suite of alternative land management types generally laid out in the National Planning Procedures Handbook. Where NESH Part 631 defines the reference states, Part 632 explains reference conditions in the context of defining how they play a role in the complex interactions with alternative states in an STM. This is a typical state and transition model you might see for a semi-arid rangeland site in Eastern Oregon on a loamy soil type. Notice it has a reference state and 3 other states that may be functions of disturbance, stressors, or historic and current management practices. In this version, we include pathways and transitions for multiple planning options to manage strategies between different cropping and rangeland states. Also notice that the transitions from a cropped option back to the rangeland state is limited only to states 2, 4, and 5. The concept here demonstrates that dynamic changes or alterations to the soil ecosystem landscape have occurred such that states 1 and 3 are not really possible as direct restoration pathways. So the National Range and Pasture Handbook describes a state change as irreversible, such that a simple change in management or natural events alone are not sufficient to change its current state. The standard for differentiating land uses as separate states must respect this threshold of active management, requiring extraordinary investment to qualify as a state change. Notice in this version that pasture states are separated from the crop states, whereas in the previous slide, they were included as phases. This is just to illustrate that some regions may or may not recognize those dynamic resource changes occurring as a result of using the land as pasture versus crop. So the goal here is to find the sweet spot between providing enough guidance to make sure there is consistent application of the ESD concepts, while also allowing localities to have the leeway to adapt these tools to serve their resource needs as best as possible in the process. Collaboration will again be critical as we deal with MLRA concepts across political and regulatory boundaries. Ideally, objectives will mesh when it comes to the goals of conservation, but not uncommonly, there are details that get stuck in the middle. Again, the purpose of national guidance is to prevent confusion and promote consistency in the product. However, building in allowances for regional context inevitably does introduce some gray areas that will need to be refereed. Our list of references includes building in the tacit knowledge coming from land managers, farmers, and ranchers applying conservation technology on the ground. Much effort is being made in the drafting of Part 632 to ensure consistency is maintained across all the references of ecological site guidance and development. At this point, we're encouraging folks to provide feedback to this process as much as possible. If you're capable of contributing, please reach out as soon as possible. Our goal is to include the widest definition of community as possible in the audience of the National Ecological Site Handbook, and Part 632 is especially inclusive. And that's it. So thank you for your time.